Chapter 12. Inside the Captain's Cabin. Their new morning routine consisted of waking, eating breakfast, then going to the galley. To Julienne, it seemed they spent the whole day cooking. The minute lunch was prepared and served, it was time to start dinner. Sylvina was quite at home in the galley, knowing exactly what to do. She knew where things were, how long to do this, how much of that to add when, all while Julienne stood around cluelessly, waiting to be shown her next task. She was a mess at the end of each day, and accomplished little. There was flour in her hair, on her face, and white handprints all over her breeches. She had just finished making a ball of dough as instructed, and now waited for someone to tell her what to do with it. "Sylvina, now what do I do?" she asked for the third time. "Just a second," Sylvina sang as she rushed about. In defeat, Julienne climbed into the seat at the counter. Her clump of dough looked pathetic, she thought with a sigh, running her fingers through the sprinkling of flour on the counter. Cocking her head, she began to trace patterns. The flour felt smooth and cool beneath her finger. First, she drew a face, too round. Then a cat, unidentifiable. Then the strange fish she had seen laughing and dancing. But her thoughts were on Austin. She hadn't seen him all day, and soon it would be time for dinner. Not that she wanted to see him, no, not at all. It's just that his name kept running through her mind. "So, you think the captain looks like a fish?" Poulet asked, looking over her shoulder at the word Austin written below the dolphin. She quickly wiped it away when she saw what she had done. "I was just... I know. He seeps into the thoughts, eh?" As if on cue, that smooth voice filled the room. "How's the help, Poulet?" Julienne spun toward him. Had he seen what she'd done? Had he heard their exchange? Did he know she was thinking about him? A wide grin appeared on his face as he walked over to her. Reaching up, he gently brushed away the flour from her face. "I came to ask if you would dine with me tonight." "Ow!" He jerked away from her, looking down at the ground. Poulet rushed over and shooed Shithead away from his captain's ankle. If she was taken off guard with a sudden invitation, she didn't show it, as she looked over at Sylvina, who was busily pretending not to listen. Dinner with him? Because he knew she was thinking of him? Did he know how much she thought of him? Did he want to take advantage of that? Just because she was thinking of him didn't mean she would fall prey to his every whim and desire. What were his whims and desires? Did he even have any? And what were his motives for suddenly being nice to her? Did he think of her too? "Jule?" "Yes." "We'd love to," she answered. He looked to Sylvina as she opened the stove. It had never occurred to him to invite her too. "Good. We'll have to get you out of those clothes. By all that's holy, you are a mess." He grinned. Julienne glanced down at herself. "Here, come with me." He gestured to the door, but at her hesitation, he suggested, "Unless you want to finish here first." She grimaced at the thought and took his offered hand. The contact between their skins sent those strange sensations through her again. Sensations she was slowly getting accustomed to. What she enjoyed most about the contact was the heat of his heavy gold ring radiating through her skin. "Bruce, where are we going?" "You'll see. I have a surprise for you." She called him Bruce, and he didn't seem to mind, she thought. She liked Bruce better than Austin. Austin reminded her of the fictional heroic pirate that no longer existed. He was not that person. He was Bruce. She felt giddy as they walked together, wondering what her surprise would be. She was holding hands with a pirate. How absurd! How thrilling! How unladylike! If Lady Brent ever saw this, this was most certainly a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Only when they reached his cabin door did she suddenly grow tense. Why would he bring her here? What was his surprise? The giddiness faded quickly. Holding hands with a pirate suddenly seemed dangerous. Of course it is dangerous. He is a pirate. She stood very still after entering the cabin. She was alone in a bedchamber with a man. he brought her to his bunk. "Here." He gestured for her to sit. "Here what?" Noticing her reluctance for the first time, he changed directions. "Sit over here at the table." He sat her in his usual seat, then pulled out a trunk from beneath his bunk. He rustled through brightly coloured materials for a long time as Julienne tried to peek over his shoulder for a hint of what he was doing. "Here it is." Julienne was shocked as he held out a beautiful ivory gown with a deep green bodice and underskirts. Why did he have gowns in his cabin? He had a whole trunk of them. Whose were they? 1,000 questions rushed through her mind as she pushed them away readily. She didn't want to know. She banished all unfavourable thoughts. Accepting the gown, she held it up under her chin. A beautiful, clean, elegant gown. Something then caught her eye. A bath? "You bathe? Gosh, was my father mistaken?" "Excuse me." "Do you use it? May I use it?" His thoughts went to the water supply briefly, then to the chance of a storm blowing them off course. "Please, Bruce?" His name sounded like music from her lips, and looking into those pleading violet eyes, he damned himself for not being able to resist. "All right, but..." She jumped up from her chair and ran to the tub. "A bath!" she sighed. How long had it been? "Jewel, it will have to be sparing." 1 inch. Anything but that pale." She shivered involuntarily. He shook his head. It would take diamonds and emeralds to make other women as happy. All she wanted was water. Air and water. Why had he gotten so angry with her? "All right, I'll get someone to bring the water. There is some coffee above the stove, or if you care for some brandy, look in that cabinet." "Would you like anything?" "I'll have a cup of coffee. Thank you." When the door closed behind him, she sighed. I was afraid of that. She had never made coffee in her life and hadn't the slightest idea where to start. She imagined it was akin to making tea. Then she realised she'd never actually made tea either. What a silly thing not to know how to do. For the first time in her entire life, she pondered the word pampered in association with herself. Brushing those thoughts away also, she mixed, poured, and boiled. She determined those to be the steps, but the particulars were unclear. Finally, when all combinations had been exhausted, she settled on her latest concoction. Time to explore Austen's domain, she thought, strolling about his cabin. It wasn't at all the catastrophe she would have expected from a room lived in by a pirate. Soon, Austen returned with 2 buckets of water. "Luke will be up soon with some more." Setting his burden down, he spied the coffee and poured himself a mug. Princess leapt to the table and lifted a graceful paw to her mouth, licking it with purpose. Her eyes never wavered from the other female in her captain's cabin. Julienne smiled and reached out to pet her, but Princess put down her paw and held her head up with a defiant glare, daring Julienne to touch her. Austen turned, aware that Julienne was no longer watching him and wanting to know the reason. He saw his cat's gesture. "Circe, leave her alone," he scolded, and the cat gave a small meow, then went back to licking her paw. "That is Princess," he said, coming back to the table. "She's beautiful." "Yes, and she knows it," he said to the cat, who after purring made her way over to his tempting hand. "Are those real diamonds?" "Aye. Nothing but the best for Circe." "Doesn't anyone try to take them from her?" "None of the crew would be foolish enough to steal them. I would undoubtedly find the jewels, and that wouldn't bode well for the thief." What did that mean, she wondered? Would he actually have someone whipped, tortured, killed? The stark reality of him being a pirate was trying to sneak in again. He scratched behind Princess's ear. "I'm surprised she's taken a liking to you, to be honest." "You call that a liking?" "It's the closest she's come to anybody in a long time. If I'd thought of her earlier, I would have kept her out of the room before the hissing and clawing started. But I guess there was no need." "Well," Julienne said with a smile to the cat, "I think it's more of a jealous curiosity than anything else." That smile grew on his face again. His voice was quiet when he teased. "And what does my cat have to be jealous of?" She felt her face heat and quickly turned away, picking up her coffee cup. Why had she said that? Austen stood, no longer paying Princess attention, and her soft paw patted his thumb. He'd told himself that Julienne was only a child, and that a little innocent teasing would all be in good fun. It didn't feel fun. He wasn't sure how to feel about her. He did not understand nor invite the feelings she evoked in him, and he would rather they just leave him alone. With the funds he acquired in London, and would soon acquire in France, he was going to settle down on his island. That was his plan. That had been his plan for years. This last caper was to bring his career to the final stages. There was no place in that plan for an innocent girl who had been forced into his life. What was he to do with her? "Do you mind if I go over some papers while we wait for your water?" he asked, breaking the silence that had overtaken the room. "Please do." He was only at his desk for a moment before he gave in to the urge to glance up at her sitting at the table. Princess had gone over to sit beside her again. "You have rubies too," Julienne said as Princess allowed her to scratch beneath her chin. "That is also my birthstone." "July?" Austen asked, not even realizing he'd been listening to her. He reached into his treasure box and took out 2 cinnamon sticks. "Yes," she answered. Lifting the treat and raising his brows, he asked, "What day?" She nodded first before catching the cinnamon stick he tossed. "The 21st. "Ah, so you are on the cusp of Cancer and Leo." "Yes. How did you know?" "Being at sea for such long periods, I've learned to bring along books on just about every subject." He gestured to his many bookcases. "What is yours?" "My birthday?" That was a hard question to answer. Having been abandoned as a babe, he didn't know the exact date. He knew it was somewhere in midsummer. Not wishing to explain, he threw out, "The 28th. "Of July? Then you are a Leo." Jules smiled down at the purring cat. "Yes, I suppose that suits him." "Fierce? Loyal? A lion?" he asked with a cocked brow. "I was thinking more arrogant, forceful, egotistical." They shared a smile. She brought the cinnamon stick to her lips. She did not notice the effect that simple gesture had on Austen. He had watched Leela use such a tactic to entice his ardour. She had slowly stroked a feather pen between her lips as she pretended to be writing, but had known Austen was watching her from the bed. The act was done for his sole benefit. He had enjoyed the show of seduction with Leela, but Julienne's innocent action was something quite different. He tore his eyes from her perfect pink lips, enclosed around his cinnamon stick, and shook his head slowly. "Get a hold of yourself, man." "Can Sylvina come with me?" "Of course." He bowed gallantly. "Your wish is my command. I should have a gown for her too." He contemplated going back to the trunk. "What colours does she prefer?" "May I look?" Excited at the prospect of getting a glimpse into the life she was accustomed to, he knelt beside her in front of the chest. He smelled of soap, sea and cinnamon. She was reminded of the first time they'd met, walking through the Cheshire and being overwhelmed by the scent of him. At least this time with being so close to the floor. If her knees gave out, she wouldn't have far to go, she thought, before reaching past him for a gown on his side of the trunk. Inhaling deeply, her knees struck the carpet in a muted thud. He began to turn to her, and she quickly changed the subject by pulling the gown free. "Ah, velvet!" Her excitement waned and her eyes widened. Oh my, oh my. These gowns were not appropriate dinner gowns. These gowns had been made for a whore. "This side of the trunk is more your style, I believe." He gestured to the gowns in front of her. She let him take the velvet gown from her and tried to concentrate on the ones he suggested. Sorting hesitantly through them all, she found herself wondering who they had been made for. Had he given them to her yet? Or did he perhaps just keep them on the ship for whichever whore visited next? How many women had been in this cabin? Was she just one in a long line to wear these gowns? Would he compare her to them? Was that how he saw her? Was that what her relationship with him was heading? She didn't know what she thought. But it wasn't this, and she could not let him think so either. I don't see anything. She hopped to her feet and swiped at her breeches as she did when smoothing her skirts. Maybe Sylvina can find something that suits her. Nothing in there will suit her. She hasn't even seen them. Sylvina is shy and innocent. Neither was true. Those were made for a whore. Your whore. All of your whores. He watched her, shock written all over his face. And how would you know something like that? I'm not completely innocent, you know. Your innocence never entered my mind, he said, mocking his knowledge that it crossed his mind frequently. I mean innocent in the knowledge that men like you exist. Jealousy overwhelmed her, another emotion foreign to her. He had a whole life out there filled with adoring women with beautiful gowns on, whom he could lavish his attentions on. She was sure he laughed easily and flashed that dimple on a regular basis with these women. Yet with her, acts of good humour were few and far between. Men like me? Yes, men like you, who buy the women with expensive gowns. And do you have a problem with giving gifts? Yes, I do, if those gifts are meant to buy favours, sexual favours. And how do you know these are not for my wife? His words paralysed her. She couldn't even breathe. Shock replaced jealousy. He was married? Her mind replayed their entire relationship in a matter of moments. Could he have a wife somewhere waiting for him to return home to their children? A wife waiting for a husband to walk through the door to pour her pent-up love upon? To cook his favourite meal, wash his clothes and cuddle with before the fire? Was he married? She dropped her head as her face grew hot. She had just called his wife a whore. There was no excuse for such vulgarity. What had she become? Where on earth did she get the effrontery to denounce his lifestyle? She was not a part of it, and had no right to judge him. He ran his hand through his hair and sighed under his breath. It was true. The gowns in question were indeed gifts for Leela. Julienne knew him for exactly what he was. This was indeed his life. It was so very different from hers. So different that she could never comprehend it. She should be home with her doting parents, extravagant foods and jewels, in a feather bed with satin sheets in her elegant mansion. She was an heiress who should be surrounded by comforts, not savages. The door opened and Lucas came in with 2 buckets of water. Luke, will you go down to the galley and bring back Sylvina? Sure, Captain. The boy's eyes grew wide. The man nodded his permission to call him by name in front of Julienne. As the door closed, Julienne picked up her coffee, leaving her back to Austin. He wasn't sure what to do. Tell her she was right? That the gowns were indeed made for a whore, his whore? Why on earth would he do that? Why would he even consider it? What about her made him want to tell her the truth? And the truth was he wanted her. He wanted to hold her in his arms, like he had that night that seemed so long ago, to feel her lips softening against his, and to feel her silken hair fall against his skin. It was no longer just a brief flirtation or fleeting distraction. He wanted her. Maybe not to bed or to marry, but he wanted her near him, in his life. Acting on instinct, he crossed the room to stand not a foot behind her. She felt his power surround her like a comfortable blanket. She turned to him and slowly looked up into his eyes. Extraordinary. She fought against the urge to reach out and close the small space between them. Her heart beat against her chest as she wanted to step back and forward with equal passion. Why was this happening to her? How could she feel like this mere moments after finding out he may be married, and that he routinely entertained whores on this very ship? Either thought should mitigate these emotions. His arms claimed her small waist, while his mouth claimed hers. Weakness invaded her body as she melted against him. With his hold tightening around her, her body deceived her and she pulled him closer. Kissing him willingly while banishing all doubts, she tipped up on her toes to draw him deeper. He bit gently on her lips. His tongue slid into her mouth and she welcomed it. Their kiss was urgent, and neither was willing to extricate themselves when they vaguely registered the door opening and Sterling entering. Austen drew in a deep, uneven breath, holding it until his mind cleared. Exhaling, he shook his head and loosened his hold. "Sterling," he greeted, his hand still resting on Julienne's waist. Julienne, unsure where to put her own hands, eventually dropped them awkwardly to her sides. "Sorry about that," Sterling said, not embarrassed in the least. "Don't mind me. I'll go eat down with the men." "No, we'll dine here, but a little later. The girls will be joining us." "Oh, that would be grand," he said with a bow. "When do you expect me back?" "I told Jules she could bathe first." Sterling's face dropped. "The water, I'm aware. I'll meet you on deck." Sterling nodded, and upon leaving, collided with Lucas and Sylvina. He patted the boy on the head as he passed by. Austen had released her completely before Sylvina and Lucas entered. "A bath?" Sylvina asked skeptically, before following Julienne's pointing finger to the tub. "I'll leave Lucas outside the door in case you need anything else," Austen said, exchanging an uncertain smile with Julienne before adding, "My soap is in my trunk." A smile began to form and she bit her lip. For some inexplicable reason, she felt very happy about his soap. She may even say giddy. He returned her smile, wondering at the expression. He then tentatively gestured towards his trunk. "You may also find a brush." They produced a giggle, and his smile grew to match hers. "In fact," he ventured, "you may use anything you wish." He then thought better of it. "Anything," he added, "but the red shirt. Everything else is at your disposal." After a moment not trusting herself to answer, she gave him a short curtsy. He chuckled and made his exit. Julienne stood staring at the door long after he was gone, her lower lip caught between her teeth. "Soap. Jewel, why don't you get the soap while I fill the tub?" Jewel's heart fluttering about her chest. She went to the large trunk by his bed and knelt before it. She had kissed a pirate. Twice, and she had truly enjoyed it. Once could be thought a mistake and perhaps brushed aside, but twice? That was an entirely different story. Twice meant that it had happened once, and they each liked it so much that it happened again. She'd kissed a pirate, and not just any pirate, but the notorious Captain Austen himself. Her brows knit. How could this man be the feared cutthroat she had heard so much about? He indeed had a temper, and he did have a penchant for bellowing. But bloodthirsty? She couldn't imagine it. She licked her lips and delighted in the taste of cinnamon, her new favourite flavour. For the rest of her life, when she smelled or tasted cinnamon, she would think of her pirate. The lid to the wood trunk was heavy. She stroked the wood. This was his trunk and his belongings. A light scent rose as she fingered through the material. Feeling the textures of his clothes and imagining him in them, she had the strange urge to climb inside and go to sleep. She clung tight to her shirt and continued her search for the soap. When she grew close to the bottom, she found a box. It was covered in black leather and had brass corners and a lock. It too was very heavy. She opened it, the hinges swinging open with ease, and found a pair of pistols. Like the case, these were also black and gold, and by their shine, brand new. Quickly hiding them away, she found the soap and closed the lid. "Jewel, I don't ever want to come out," Sylvina said from the warmth, popping some bubbles that bobbed against the interior of the tub. Julienne hummed her agreement from the trunk of gowns, wrapped only in a rough towel. The materials were soft, and she pointedly thought only of the comfort they would bring and not their origin. She sighed. "Mamma, remember when you told me about those feelings you had for Papa? How you still feel tingly when he's in the same room with you, and all is right with the world? And I told you I felt that way with Delmont. Well, it turns out I lied. I didn't mean to. It's just that, until now, I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me. He's different, Mamma. I know he's a pirate and has done terrible things, but that doesn't seem to matter to me. I know I should be with Delmont and live as a lady in society and help with charities, and I will, I promise I will. It's just that I have never experienced this, anything like it, and I will never in my entire life be in this position again. And I want to take full advantage of it. Savour it while it lasts, Mamma. Just for a little while. What do you think? Jewel, do you think they'd mind if we borrowed some clean clothes? I hate to put those dirty clothes on my new clean body. Julienne smiled, looking at the ceiling. I'll take that as approval. Milady, you may wear whatever pleases you tonight. What colour gown will it be? Oh, a gown? Even better, Sylvina said, relaxing against the back of the tub. Pale yellow, I should think. Julienne quickly and quietly found exactly what she hoped for. Is this suitable, milady? Sylvina started to wave it away, then sat up in astonishment. Jewel! I know. There's a whole trunk of them. Why? Where did they come from? Sylvina asked, getting out of the tub and coming for the gown while wrapping a towel about herself. Julienne picked up Austen's brush and occupied herself with her hair, avoiding the question. Look at this! Sylvina cried, pulling out a red and black satin brocade gown. This wasn't made for any lady. Julienne's eyes widened at the shocking boldness of the design. She would deny the name of the person who purchased the gown access to her thoughts. Jewel, help me put it on. By all that's holy, Sylvina, just for fun. Come on, come help. Even as Julienne wanted to refuse to help, she had to admit it was tempting. It took them hardly a moment before they had all clasps secured, and Sylvina was spinning for Julienne's assessment. The only conclusion she could reach was that if this had been Sylvina's chosen profession, she would be quite sought after. If we did something about your hair, you could reign over London, Sylvina squealed. Seriously, you're just stunning. We'd have to tighten it about the waist, and the neckline could come up a couple of feet. They laughed and joked, savouring their exceedingly rare opportunity to play on a pirate ship. Rummaging around, they came across a needle and thread, underskirts, slippers, jewellery, and a few items Julienne couldn't quite categorise. Sylvina pulled out a pink and white taffeta dress. I think this suits me a little better. Try it on. Oh, I want this one. Flounces of teal blue satin puffed out about Julienne as she clutched it to her. Only minutes later they stood back to back, frowning down at their new attire. Sylvina took a deep breath. This one actually isn't much better than the brocade. Slowly, they turned in towards each other. Oh my goodness, Jewel, where did those come from? Julienne looked down at her very exposed breasts. They seem to have come with the gown. Can you imagine if Delmont saw you in that? There was a knock at the door. The girls panicked and instinctively began searching for a place to hide. Sylvina grabbed Julienne's arms. What are we to do? Jewel, came Austen's call from outside. Are you ready? She waved her hands at her sides. Just a moment. Jewel, we can't wear these. Of course not. The food's out here with us. Can we come in? Julienne bit her lip. What do I say? The girls looked each other over closely. Sylvina smiled wickedly. Never in her life had she dreamed of being so scandalous. Sure, she had passed brothels and been to the darker parts of London, but never had she been part of it or worn an actual elegant gown of the night. It felt positively wicked. Julienne nervously twisted her hands. We shouldn't. Of course we shouldn't. But neither girl turned to change or send the men away. Jewel, he called again. They looked towards the voice beyond the door and smoothed the wrinkles from the most provocative, scandalous gowns that would ever adorn their two bodies. Just a moment, Julienne called, reaching for 2 handkerchiefs. They tucked them down the bodices, leaving the tops to cover their exposed bosoms. Come in,